Karen tossed my daughter's wheelchair into the lake. She had no clue I was a Navy SEAL. My name is Logan Pierce. I'm a retired Navy SEAL, but today, I'm just a father. If you'd asked me what real war felt like, I would have said Ramadi, 2006. That was before I watched a woman throw my disabled daughter's wheelchair into a lake and smile as she did it. It happened on the kind of morning that tricks you into believing the world is good. Sun high, birds loud. My little girl, Cassidy, was finally brave enough to go outside again. We'd moved to Willow Glen a few months ago, hoping for quiet, routine, healing. Cassidy was only 9. Her spinal injury from the crash had taken more than just her ability to walk. It stole her light. But that morning she was glowing. She was by the lake, sketching ducks, when Karen showed up. Her real name was Marlena Whitmore, but everyone in Willow Glen just called her Karen, a title she earned like a military rank. Blonde bob, fake clipboard, a badge she printed herself that said, Property Standards Enforcement. She never smiled, only smirked, and somehow controlled the entire neighborhood with a tone of voice that made grown men shrink. You can't park medical equipment on green space, she snapped. I was 10 feet away. I heard it, thought it was a joke. Cassidy looked up at her, confused. It's my wheelchair, she whispered. Karen didn't hesitate. She grabbed the chair by its handles and shoved it, Cassidy still halfway out of it, down the slope into the lake. I ran, but it was too late. Water swallowed it, the canvas seat bobbing once, then sinking under the surface. Cassidy screamed. So did I. That's when Karen looked me in the eye, shrugged, and said, should have followed the rules? Neighbor. She had no idea who I was, or what she just started. The first thing I noticed when we moved to Willow Glen was how everything looked. Perfect. Too perfect. The grass along the sidewalks was trimmed with military precision. The mailboxes were painted the exact same shade of beige. Even the ducks on the lake seemed to paddle in straight lines. After 10 years deployed across the world, I thought that kind of order would feel like peace. But there was something about it that felt brittle. Like one wrong move would crack the whole illusion. We moved here for Cassidy, my daughter, 9 years old, feisty as hell, and braver than anyone I've ever met, including the men I served with. She'd been in the back seat the day a drunk driver barreled through a red light and crushed the left side of our SUV. Her spine had taken the worst of it. The doctors were honest. She may never walk again. They said, Cassidy never cried. She just asked when she could go back to her sketching club. I sold the townhouse in Baltimore, left the city noise behind, and used the last of my retirement to buy a lakeside home in Willow Glen. It's quiet, the realtor said. Tight-knit, HOA managed, so things stay orderly. HOA. I should have seen the red flag right there. I met Karen, real name Marlena Whitmore, within our first week. She didn't knock. She didn't smile. She just stood on our front porch like she owned the damn deed and tapped on the doorframe with a pen. You've got a garden hose hanging over your front railing, she said, without greeting. That's against HOA Code 4.2b. I was still carrying boxes inside. You mean the hose I used to clean my daughter's wheelchair tires? I asked calmly. She narrowed her eyes, clipboard tucked under her arm like a sheriff's badge. It doesn't matter. Willow Glen has standards. I stared at her. So do I. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the fines started arriving, little slips of paper folded and shoved under our door like passive-aggressive threats. Unpermitted wheelchair ramp installation, $250 fine. Excessive noise, Cassidy's music class, $75 fine. Unauthorized vehicle in driveway, $100 fine for my adapted van. I tried to reason with her. I emailed, called, even stopped by the HOA office, which turned out to be a spare room in Karen's own house. She smiled politely, patted her stack of compliance reports, and said, you can appeal, of course, but most appeals are denied. Cassidy tried to hide the notes from me. She was scared, not of Karen, but of making me angry. She saw how much I'd sacrificed to give her a new start. She didn't want to ruin it. Maybe we should just take the ramp down, she said one night. I can crawl if I need to. My hands trembled. No, you won't. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the edge of her bed while she dreamed, her breathing soft and shallow, her sketchbook tucked under her arm like a teddy bear. I'd been trained to handle hostage crises, chemical warfare, insurgent ambushes, but I didn't know how to fight a system that looked like suburban civility on the outside and punished my daughter for existing on the inside. Then came the day at the lake. Cassidy had been cooped up for weeks, too nervous to even roll outside. So when she asked to go sketch the ducks by the water, I smiled. We packed her charcoal pencils, her notebook, and rolled down to the lake path behind our house. There's a slope leading down to the water's edge. I helped her settle near a shady patch under the trees, about 5 feet from the dock. She waved me off like a teenager. I got this, Dad. Just sit over there. Don't hover. I chuckled and stepped back, pulling out my phone to scroll while she worked. That's when Karen appeared. I didn't hear her walk up, just the sharp crack of her voice breaking through the peace. Hey, that device is not allowed on recreational property. Cassidy blinked, looked up. What Karen marched forward like a traffic warden on a power trip. She pointed at the wheelchair like it was a stray shopping cart. Mobility devices are a violation of Lakefront Ordinance 5.1 unless pre-approved and parked in designated areas. This is green space. I stood. She's not parked. She's sketching. Karen ignored me. She stepped closer to Cassidy. Her face flushed. This is what happens when people think disability is an excuse for disorder, she muttered. Cassidy looked terrified. Don't touch her. I warned. Karen's hand reached for the chair. She shoved it. Cassidy lurched forward, her hands scrambling for grip, but the wheels turned too fast. Momentum winning. The whole chair tilted, slipped off the edge of the slope, and splashed into the lake. Cassidy rolled to the side, falling out just before it hit the water. Her sketchbook went flying. She landed hard in the grass. I was already running. By the time I got there, the chair was half submerged, the seat ripped, the metal frame bent from the impact. Cassidy clutched her arm, eyes wide, gasping. Karen stood there, arms crossed. No need to get aggressive, she said, as if I was the problem. I couldn't speak. Rage clogged my throat. My military training screamed at me to remain calm, but my father's heart wanted to explode. You just assaulted my daughter, I said. She's fine, Karen snapped. It's not like she was injured. Cassidy cried silently. That was it. That was the moment I stopped seeing Karen as a nuisance and started seeing her as a threat. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, I wasn't helpless. I spent years as a Navy SEAL gathering intelligence, reading enemy patterns, dismantling networks piece by piece. And right then, I realized this wasn't just about my daughter. It was bigger. The fines, the fake citations, the self-printed badges, the so-called ordinances no one had ever heard of. What if the HOA wasn't even real? I started pulling threads. First, public records. Willow Glen didn't have a registered homeowners association. The original developers dissolved it 10 years ago. That meant Karen wasn't a president. She was a pretender. Second, I interviewed neighbors, quietly, us casually. A retired teacher said her garden gnomes were stolen after a compliance notice. A Latino family down the street had been threatened with legal action over their American flag display. Every story pointed to the same source, Karen Whitmore. Third, I traced the fine payments. Every check was made out not to Willow Glen HOA, but to Whitmore Neighborhood Services, LLC. She'd invented a fake HOA, enforced fake rules, and funneled money from the entire neighborhood into her personal account, and no one had dared question it. Until now. Cassidy watched me from the dining table the next morning. Her arm was bruised, her sketchbook was water damaged, but her eyes, those fierce, fighter's eyes, were back. What are you going to do, Dad? She asked. I smiled. Everything I was trained to do. The morning after Karen threw Cassidy's wheelchair into the lake, the sun rose like nothing had happened. But in our house, something had shifted. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a weapon with a target. Karen had hurt my daughter, and she was running a scam that had bullied and robbed half the neighborhood. Most people were too afraid or too tired to fight, but she hadn't counted on me. I brewed a pot of coffee, laid out 3 notebooks on the kitchen counter, and opened my laptop. I had everything I needed: training in intelligence gathering, experience in asymmetrical operations, and now motive. Cassidy wheeled into the room slowly, using an old backup chair I'd kept from rehab. It didn't fit her well, and I could see the bruises on her hands from trying to maneuver it. "Want help, sweetheart?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not this time. I need to stay strong." God, I love that kid. First stop, the county records office. I drove downtown, parked behind a pawn shop, and walked into the public registry with a ball cap pulled low. Years of covert habit never quite left you. I asked for all registered HOA filings in Willow Glen. The clerk, a young guy named Travis, pulled up a list on his screen. There used to be one. He said, clicking, filed back in 2006 by the Willow Glen Development Group, but looks like it was dissolved in 2013. Dissolved, I asked, feigning confusion. He nodded. Yeah, usually happens when the founding board disbands and no one picks it up. So there's no active HOA here. Not officially. I leaned closer. Then who the hell is finding us? He paused. That's weird. Back home, I called 3 of my neighbors, ones who had confided in me about issues, but never dared go public. I asked for permission to review the fines they'd received. What I found made my blood run cold. Every letter was signed by WNS, Enforcement Division, stamped with a fake seal, and requested payment to Whitmore Neighborhood Services, the same shell company Karen had created 4 years ago. I checked the company's registration. It was a private LLC, using her home address as its base. She wasn't just playing pretend. She was stealing thousands of dollars over 4 years. Next, I visited James Yoon, a retired Air Force captain who lived 2 houses down. I'd seen him in a walker, always polite, but clearly worn out. James had been fined over $2,000 for patriotic displays out of compliance because he kept a folded flag on his porch, a tribute to his late wife. When I explained what I'd found, he stared at me like I'd handed him back his dignity. She told me she'd sue, he whispered. Said I was breaking neighborhood order. You weren't, I said. You were her target. He nodded slowly. What are you going to do? Tell the truth. I created a Google Drive folder. I uploaded every piece of evidence, scanned copies of the fake fines, property tax records showing no active HOA, business filings for Whitmore Neighborhood Services, video I pulled from a neighbor's doorbell cam showing Karen throwing Cassidy's wheelchair into the lake, testimonies from residents she harassed. Then I sent a link to every single house in Willow Glen. No subject line, just one sentence. This is what she's been doing to all of us. Within 48 hours, the neighborhood erupted. It started with phone calls, then porch meetings, then front yard huddles. Someone created a group chat, WG, Truth Circle. By day 3, it had 127 members. People shared stories, photos, receipts. Someone dug up a recording of Karen threatening a Vietnamese family for painting their porch red. Another neighbor, an elderly widow, revealed she'd paid over $600 in excessive bird feeder fines. The angriest of all, a single mom named Eliza, whose autistic son had been banned from playing on the sidewalk due to sensory disruptions. And the tipping point, a man named Samuel Granger, an attorney, shared proof that Karen had filed small claim suits in her fake HOA's name. She'd actually been in court, impersonating a legal entity. That crossed the line from fraud to felony. Karen must have sensed it coming. By Friday afternoon, she walked the neighborhood with that same clipboard, smiling, trying to act like nothing was wrong, but doors didn't open for her anymore. Blinds didn't twitch politely. They snapped shut. Then someone, maybe one of the teens, printed flyers from the Google Drive folder and stapled them to every mailbox. Whitmore's lies exposed. Protect our neighborhood, Saturday morning. I stepped outside to find my mailbox had been torn off. Typical Karen. But she wasn't invisible anymore. She came to my door that afternoon, unannounced, of course. Karen didn't knock. She just stood on my porch, arms folded like I owed her something. "You've started something dangerous," she said, her voice tight. I didn't open the screen. She continued, "I'm warning you. Logan, you're stirring up people who don't understand how this works. I've kept this place in order." I opened the door slowly, not wide, just enough. "You threw my daughter's wheelchair into the lake," I said quietly. She didn't flinch. It was a safety issue. She snapped, "You scammed a neighborhood. I enforce standards." I leaned in close. I was a Navy SEAL. I whispered, "I've disarmed warlords with more integrity than you, and now you're going to answer for every damn thing you've done." She turned pale, and she walked away. That night, Cassidy wheeled up beside me on the porch. The moonlight spilled across the lake where her chair had disappeared. She didn't say anything. She just leaned her head on my arm. "I thought people wouldn't care," she said. "They do," I replied. "Even about someone like me," I kissed the top of her head, "especially about someone like you." By Sunday, Willow Glen wasn't just buzzing, it was boiling. The thread I'd pulled unraveled something none of us had expected. Karen hadn't just invented a fake HOA. She'd constructed a full-scale, deeply integrated illusion of power, complete with fraudulent legal filings, falsified enforcement letters, and a private network of intimidation that reached into nearly every household. And the worst part, she wasn't working alone. I spent that morning mapping her operation like I would a tactical zone. Every scam has a pattern. Karen's was no exception. Fake authority. She created a shell company, Whitmore Neighborhood Services, LLC, 4 years ago, filing it as a community improvement consultancy. The compliance trap. She drafted fake HOA bylaws, designed enforcement letters, and printed them on official-looking letterhead. Target the vulnerable, she began with residents least likely to push back elderly folks, immigrants, disabled families, always alone, always quietly. Leverage fear. Once someone paid a fine, they were marked compliant and pressured to comply again or risk escalation. But this next discovery hit harder than all the rest. She had accomplices. Her brother-in-law, Craig Lutz, was a local process server. He'd served over 18 small claims, summonses on her behalf under the fake HOA banner. He was the muscle behind the curtain, pressuring folks with legal jargon and threats. Then there was Angela Fisk, a local notary who'd authenticated dozens of forged compliance orders, probably thinking they were legit. Worst of all, Karen had paid a freelance web developer to build a website for WGHOA, complete with bylaws, fake minutes from non-existent board meetings, and a payment portal that funneled money straight into her private account. I downloaded everything. Monday morning, I filed a formal complaint with the County Fraud Division. I showed them the paper trail, the receipts, the testimonies, the footage. I handed over a flash drive with a full digital map of her operation. I included a sworn affidavit with my military ID attached. It didn't take much explaining, just showing them the surveillance footage of Karen laughing as she hurled Cassidy's wheelchair into the lake. The investigator, a tall woman named Trina Delgado, watched it 3 times. "That's not HOA enforcement," she said darkly. "That's assault and fraud." She opened a folder labeled Prosecutorial Targets, Civil Fraud Cases, and wrote Whitmore, Marlena Priority. The fallout began the next morning. An official notice was posted on Karen's door by 8:00 a.m. Cease and desist, unauthorized business operations. The same notice was emailed to every household in Willow Glen. But Karen wasn't ready to go down without a fight. She called an emergency HOA town meeting that afternoon, trying to reassert control, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, claimed I was a disgruntled newcomer with a military complex. But this time, people didn't just show up. They recorded everything. The community center overflowed. I counted at least 150 neighbors. Even James Yoon, in his walker, showed up and stood near the front. Karen took the stage in a white blazer and pearl earrings, as if she was hosting a brunch. Her voice was tight but rehearsed. "There has been confusion," she began. "Yes, I've helped enforce community guidelines. Because we lacked structure. Because we needed order." Someone shouted, "We needed honesty." Another voice yelled, "Where's my $400 Karen?" Then Eliza stood up, holding her phone. She played the footage of Karen screaming at her son. "Your autistic kid is disrupting neighborhood harmony." Gasps. Karen's face twitched. "That video is out of context." I stepped forward and plugged in a USB drive to the projector. The screen lit up with a spreadsheet of every check deposited to Whitmore Neighborhood Services from neighborhood residents totaling $86,295.13 in 4 years. Every name, every dollar, every lie. Then came the security footage. The moment Karen pushed Cassidy's wheelchair into the lake, silence. All you could hear was the faint sound of my daughter crying on the tape. Someone screamed, "You monster, James Yoon!" Voice shaking with fury, said, "I lost my flag and my wife the same year, and you fined me for honoring her." Karen tried to speak again, but the crowd turned hostile. It wasn't just outrage now. It was righteous fury. I walked up beside her, calmly. "No one here voted for you." I said, "You invented authority, and you used it to target people you thought couldn't fight back." "I brought order." She spat. "You brought fear." Police arrived 30 minutes later. Quiet, professional. They walked her out in the handcuffs. But the story didn't end there. Because once the media caught wind of what happened to fake HOA president extorting a whole neighborhood, assaulting a disabled child, and scamming nearly $90,000 Willow Glen became national news, reporters parked on our street, news vans clogged the cul-de-sac. Karen's mugshot was everywhere, and people started asking bigger questions. How many other neighborhoods had someone like her? How many rules were being enforced by people who were never elected, never verified, just loud, persuasive bullies with a printer? A week later, I got a letter from the district attorney. Karen Whitmore was being charged with felony fraud, criminal impersonation, theft by deception, assault on a minor with disability enhancements under Ada law. Craig Lutz was under investigation. Angela Fisk lost her notary license. And the web developer cooperated, fully turned over everything. But the real moment of justice didn't come in court. It came when Cassidy rolled into her art class again. This time in a brand new, custom-fitted wheelchair donated by a nonprofit veteran group. The kids clapped, and for the first time in weeks, my daughter smiled wide and said, "I feel seen." Justice doesn't always come wrapped in ribbons or read off by a judge. Sometimes it crashes down like thunder. Sometimes it bleeds out slow, dragging every lie and mask into the light. For Karen Whitmore, it came both ways. The morning after her arrest, the neighborhood was still buzzing like a beehive someone had kicked open. Mailboxes, once silent, were now stages for conversation. Kids whispered about the lady in cuffs. Adults stood shoulder to shoulder like survivors of a storm. Everyone had a story about Karen. And now, for the first time, they weren't scared to tell them. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end. That Karen would vanish into some legal limbo while life in Willow Glen reset itself. But Karen wasn't done. From the county jail, she filed motions, claims of defamation, a wrongful arrest. She tried to position herself as the victim, spinning tales of a conspiracy led by a dangerous ex-military resident with delusions of grandeur. That would have been laughable if the judge hadn't allowed her a bail hearing. Cassidy and I watched the stream from home. Karen sat stiffly in her orange jumpsuit, makeup gone, hair pulled back too tight. A lawyer, fresh-faced and clearly overwhelmed, stood beside her. "We argue Ms. Whitmore was providing a valuable community service," he said. "She filled a leadership vacuum in the absence of a formal HOA. The funds she received were voluntary compliance contributions. The prosecutor didn't even flinch. She impersonated legal authority, forged documents, filed false claims, and assaulted a disabled minor. This wasn't leadership. It was a racket." The judge set bail at $500. Karen's lips curled, even behind a screen. I could see the fire in her eyes. She was going to fight this, and so was I. What Karen hadn't anticipated was that her downfall wouldn't be delivered just by court filings, but by the people she had stepped on for years. The Willow Glen Truth Circle, now 189 members strong, wasn't just a chat anymore. It was a movement. People organized, a class action lawsuit began forming with Granger Law. A local podcast hosted a 5-part series, HOA Tyrant, The Whitmore Scandal. A veteran-owned nonprofit began collecting donations for Cassidy's new chair and launched a disability access initiative in Karen's name, ironically. But perhaps most powerful was the HOA Truth Forum, which brought together residents from across the state. Dozens of stories emerged of fake enforcers, unelected board leaders, and abuse hidden behind legal-sounding language. Karen wasn't an anomaly. She was a symptom. A week later, I got a visit from a federal agent, Agent Renata Clark, Department of Housing and Urban Development. She'd seen the viral story, read the report, and she had questions. "Mr. Pierce," she said, "do you realize this is the first documented case where someone used a falsified HOA structure to generate over $85,000 in revenue while submitting false legal documents and assaulting a federal protected class?" "I do now," I said. "We're opening a federal investigation," she added. "This could redefine HOA regulation at a national level." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "And if you're willing, we'd like you to testify." I agreed, of course. For Cassidy, for the Yuns, for Eliza's boy, for every person too scared to fight back. I flew to Deershire that month and sat in front of a congressional subcommittee on housing fraud. Not in uniform, but as a dad. I told them everything. How Karen had terrorized our neighborhood with fake rules. How no one had stopped her because she sounded official. How my daughter, who had already lost so much, was treated like clutter. Cassidy sat behind me the whole time, next to Eliza, holding a sketch pad in her lap. I watched the faces in the room change as I spoke. Some went pale, some flushed red with anger. By the end, 2 congressmen requested a federal review of HOA oversight procedures. Another introduced a bill, Cassidy's bill, that would make impersonating HOA or local government authority a federal crime if it involved targeting protected citizens. Karen's name was printed on the front page of that bill's justification. She would go down in history, just not the way she wanted. But the final blow came not from Washington, not from the courtroom, but from the town she thought she ruled. Karen's trial was held 2 months later. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall. Cassidy was given her own section, surrounded by community members who'd come to support her. Karen walked in wearing a tan blazer, chin high, eyes narrowed. The judge read off the charges: felony fraud, criminal impersonation, assault with special circumstances targeting a disabled minor, identity theft, wire fraud. When the prosecution played the Lake video again, the room went still. Cassidy reached for my hand. The defense tried to spin it. Moment of frustration. They said, a misstep. Not malicious, but the evidence was too clear, too overwhelming. After 2 days of testimony and 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty on all counts. Karen didn't cry. She just stared ahead, like it wasn't happening. Like if she stayed still long enough, the world would rewind. The judge sentenced her to 9 years in state prison, plus full restitution to every family she had defrauded. The court ordered her to publicly forfeit all claims to community leadership past, present, and future. And then, the judge looked directly at her and said, "You used authority you didn't earn to destroy the lives of people you didn't understand. That ends now." Afterward, we stepped outside. Cassidy's chair was new, her sketchbook full, her voice stronger. She looked at me, eyes blinking in the sunlight. "Do you think she learned anything?" I knelt beside her. "I don't know," I said, "but the world did. Some storms don't leave broken branches behind. They leave room for something better to grow." Karen Whitmore was gone. Her sentencing had made state news, even national blogs. Fake HOA queen gets 9 years, one headline read. Wheelchair scandal sparks housing reform. Read another. But in Willow Glen, now lovingly nicknamed Brookhaven by the neighbors, what mattered more than the headlines was the healing. And healing, like all things worth having, takes work. The first thing the community did was tear down every fake rule Karen had installed. Gone were the quiet time signs near the lake. Gone were the laminated no flags over 3x5 feet notices taped to porches. Gone were the fake HOA parking tickets, fake architectural review guidelines, and the fake board meeting invitations written in Comic Sans and printed on pastel paper. We even had a neighborhood bonfire night, where residents brought old HOA fines and burned them together on the lake shore. James Yoon brought the flag Karen had tried to ban and raised it high over the gathering. Cassidy sat on my shoulders as the crowd counted down and cheered. The smoke smelled like freedom. Then came the harder part, deciding what should replace it. Because even without Karen, the neighborhood still needed structure, not control, not domination, just cooperation. It was Cassidy who said it best. "What if we made a council instead of a board?" she said at dinner one night. "Like a team, not just one person making rules." Her voice was stronger now. She rolled confidently in her new carbon fiber chair, bright teal with custom wheels. She'd started drawing again portraits. Mostly, one of her latest ace sketch of the lake, with people laughing, kids playing, flags waving free. "A team sounds fair," I told her. "We'll call it the Brookhaven Civic Circle." We met on neutral ground, James's garage. No suits, no fake badges, just folding chairs, lemonade, and post-it notes on the wall. 9 households volunteered to join the new civic circle. Different backgrounds, different stories. Every one of them had once been silenced by Karen. Now, they were ready to lead. Our first rule was simple. No one leads alone. There would be no president, no power posturing. Decisions would be made by vote, discussion, and open records. Our second rule. Every voice counts, especially the young, the disabled, the immigrants, the elders. Our third, transparency. Always. We created a shared online board with meeting notes, updates, and a community request form. Anyone in Brookhaven could log on and submit ideas, complaints, or praise. Within a month, the change was visible. Someone planted a wildflower garden near the playground, replacing the prickly hedges Karen had installed. Eliza's son painted a mural on the sidewalk, vibrant, bold, with the words, "We all belong." James helped install solar lights along the walking paths. And me, I got elected chair of accessibility services unanimously. I built 3 new ramps, added 2 accessible benches, and trained a crew of volunteers to maintain them. Cassidy rolled beside me at every build. She became the face of Brookhaven's new identity, not as victims, but as voices. The media kept circling for weeks, hoping for drama. But they found something else, a quiet revolution. A neighborhood once paralyzed by fear, now powered by unity. NBC did a feature, From Scandal to Civic Strength, The Rise of Brookhaven. It showed Cassidy painting with kids by the lake. It showed James saluting beside his flag. It even caught me tearing up while reading a note someone left in our mailbox. "Thank you for making this feel like home again." A year later, we held our first Brookhaven Festival. There were food trucks, music, crafts, and a makeshift gallery where Cassidy's sketches hung beside photos of the lake and its people. She sold her first piece that day, a charcoal drawing titled, "The Day the Water Was Still." A woman bought it for $300. When I asked Cassidy what she'd do with the money, she grinned. "I want to start a fund," she said, "to help kids like me get chairs they love." And so she did. As for Karen, she appealed her conviction twice. Both were denied. In prison, she tried to rebrand herself as a community management consultant, but the world had already seen through her. Her name became a warning. Her story, a lesson. The DOJ launched a national task force on HOA abuse. Cassidy's bill passed with bipartisan support. Fraudulent enforcement was now a federal offense. Fake HOAs across the country dissolved as whistleblowers gained courage from her case. Even now, strangers write us letters, some angry, some grateful, all affected. One evening, Cassidy and I sat by the lake, the same lake where her wheelchair had vanished. But tonight, the surface was calm. A swan drifted near the dock. The air smelled like honeysuckle. I don't think she ever saw me as a person, Cassidy said. I nodded slowly. She saw weakness, and that made her feel powerful. But I wasn't weak, she whispered. No, I said. You were strong enough to survive her, strong enough to change everything. Cassidy looked out over the water. Do you think she's sorry? I said gently. Some people regret, and some people just fade. And with that, we sat in silence, letting the new world we built settle in around us. Some wars are loud, some are legal, but the most important ones are fought quietly, with courage, community, and the refusal to ever back down again. The end.